"Grandma, I'm hungry. Mom won't wake up," and he locked the door. A midnight phone call that unraveled a suffocating journey of love, pain, and hope. Can a 72-year-old grandmother change her entire family's fate with one decision? My name is Clara Jensen. I'm 72. And on a Tuesday night, I received a phone call that changed my life and my family's forever. I was washing dishes under the soft yellow glow of the kitchen light, the curtains swaying gently with the first winds of autumn. When the phone rang, I saw an unfamiliar number flash on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me, a quiet intuition, the instinct only a grandmother could have, made me lift the receiver. "Sweetheart," I asked, my voice trembling. On the other end came a small, shaky whisper, as if someone were speaking from the dark. "Grandma, I'm hungry. Mom's been sleeping a long time and..." He locked the door. "I'm scared, Grandma." I froze. It was Noah, my grandson, 7 years old. His voice cracked between frightened breaths. "Where are you, baby? Tell Grandma I'm listening," I shouted, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone. I hear a car. I have to hang up. Bang! A car door slammed. Then, silence. The screen flashed, call ended. For a few seconds, I just stood there, then dialed back. No answer. Once, twice, 3 times. I tried Tina's number, his mother, but all I got was that cold, familiar voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Tina." If your heart clenched just at the thought of that, leave a comment and hit subscribe. Here, we share stories of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family, at any age. I grabbed my coat, my purse, and my car keys. My heart pounded as I rushed out into the night. At 72, I could still drive if my grandson's life was at stake. I hadn't seen Noah in over 6 months. Tina, my daughter, had slowly cut off contact after moving in with a man named Jeff. The last time I saw Noah, he was all bones and shadows, but he still smiled when I secretly slipped an old phone into his backpack and whispered, "If you ever need Grandma anytime, just one call." And now, that call had come. My car tore down the empty streets, headlights slicing through the darkness like blades through the thick air of panic. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Every passing minute felt like another cut to the heart. I reached Riverbend, a rundown neighborhood on the edge of town, where Tina said she'd moved almost a year ago. House number 8113 sat at the end of the street, a rotting wooden shack, paint peeling, grass waist high, not a single light. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I pounded the door, shouting my daughter's and grandson's names. Silence. I circled to the side of the house. The kitchen window was low. The curtain was half drawn. Inside was chaos. Dishes piled high, garbage spilling onto the floor, empty liquor bottles scattered about. No more hesitation. I picked up a decorative garden stone and swung. Crash. Glass shattered, shards raining into the sink. I brushed them aside with my elbow and climbed through. My palm split open, blood oozing, but I didn't feel pain, only dread. The smell hit me next. Alcohol, rot, and something terribly wrong. I landed on my knees. Sharp pain. Didn't matter. In the living room, I froze. On the couch lay my daughter, Tina, on her side, one arm dangling toward the floor. Her face was pale, lips parted, stinking of liquor. Her clothes wrinkled, her hair stuck to her forehead. Beside her, a bucket and an empty whiskey bottle. I rushed over and shook her. No reaction. I pressed her wrist. There was a pulse, faint but steady. For now, she was alive. Then, I heard it. A faint sob, choked and trembling from upstairs. I went rigid. Step by step I climbed. Blood from my hand streaked the banister. My heart thundered in my chest. 3 doors in the hallway, 2 open, 1 closed tight, and on that door a shiny metal padlock on the outside. My throat went dry. I fumbled with it, slippery with blood, wiped my hands on my coat, and twisted. The lock gave way. The room was dark. A thin mattress on the floor, stained walls. The window was painted white, and in the corner, Noah, curled up, clutching a faded baseball cap. "Grandma." His voice broke, somewhere between terror and relief. "You really came?" I ran to him and pulled him into my arms. His little body was so thin I could count the bones of his spine, his shoulder blades jutting out, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm so hungry," he whispered, still trembling. "He only gives me cookies. It's been days." The cap in his hands, Ethan's cap, his father's, my late son's, still had the old stitched seam at the back. Noah held it like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Tears blurred my vision. I scooped him up, blood and all. He wrapped his arms tight around my neck. His hair smelled of oil and dust, his body weightless. "It's okay now, Noah. Grandma's here. I won't leave you here another second." But before I could wrap him in a blanket, a noise came from downstairs, the front door unlocking, then slamming. Heavy footsteps. The stench of alcohol rises with every step. A tall, broad-shouldered man stumbled into the house, face flushed, eyes glassy. Jeff. The man my daughter had brought home one night, and the man who'd slowly taken over her life and her house. "What the hell is this?" he slurred, staggering toward the stairs. His eyes landed on me, holding Noah. His face twisted. "You get that kid out of my house," he roared, his voice slicing through the air like a knife. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. Phone in hand, I pressed 911 and switched to speaker mode. The dispatcher's voice came through, cold but professional. 911, what's your location? Is there bleeding? Is anyone being threatened?" 247 Riverbend, house number 813, I said, my tone like steel, even as my hands trembled. "There's a child locked in a room, starving. A drunk man is inside the house. The mother is unconscious. Please send police and an ambulance immediately." Jeff took a few steps forward, leaning down toward Noah with eyes that looked like they wanted to consume. "Get out of my house. You don't belong here. You broke my door? You want to die, old woman?" He grabbed my wrist, trying to shove me, but he was too drunk, his feet unsteady, his balance gone. I turned the speaker volume all the way up. "I'm calling the police," I said loudly enough for anyone across the street to hear. "I'm recording everything. You will not touch my grandson." Something in my voice made him hesitate. Maybe it was the tone, unyielding, fearless, or maybe it was something more profound, the raw, primal scream of a grandmother protecting the only family she had left. Moments later, sirens wailed at the end of the street, distant, then closer. In what felt like the longest minutes of my life, footsteps thundered on the porch, glass shattered, and two uniformed officers burst in through the kitchen window, hands on their holsters, but guns still holstered. "Police! Everyone stay where you are!" one shouted. The two scanned the room quickly. They went for Jeff first, ordering him to back off. Jeff flailed, mumbling, then collapsed into a chair, defeated by his own intoxication. Another officer rushed upstairs, checking Tina first. They called her name softly, lifted her wrist, and checked her pulse. A paramedic team followed, fitting an oxygen mask over Tina's face and monitoring her vitals. A woman in a medic's uniform knelt beside Noah, placing gentle fingers on his wrist. "Noah, are you hurt anywhere? When was the last time you ate?" she asked, her voice like silk. "I don't remember." His voice was thin, fragile as glass. "Just candy. Cookies. A few days ago." Under the harsh living room light, the police cuffed Jeff. He stood wobbling, staring blankly at me. I didn't do anything," he slurred. But he was far too drunk for his words to matter. A medic carefully lifted Noah onto a small stretcher, wrapping him in a warm blanket. "He needs to go to the hospital for fluids and a full checkup," she said. "Will you be coming with him, ma'am?" another asked. I looked at Noah's frail, hollowed-out face and felt my heart shatter. Yes, I'm coming. I'm his grandmother," I managed to say, my voice cracking. Before they wheeled him away, Noah reached for my hand, his eyes wide as if clinging to the last bit of warmth in the world. "Grandma, you'll stay with me, right?" he whispered. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not leaving you again." I held his small hand tight, memorizing that feeling forever. The ambulance pulled out of the driveway, lights flashing in the night. Officers took statements, photographed the scene, collected bottles, and arrested Jeff for child abuse, neglect, and possible violation of prior protective orders. One officer handed me a slip of paper. "We'll handle emergency custody and paperwork. You should stay with your grandson at the hospital." I looked back at the house one last time, living room trashed, the air thick with alcohol, then climbed into the ambulance, tears blurring my sight. Inside me was a storm, anger, exhaustion, and a faint, trembling relief. At least Noah was finally safe. Hospitals at midnight always carry a distinct smell, antiseptic, cold fluorescent lights, and the quiet fatigue that seeps into the walls. Noah lay on the ER bed, wrapped in a white blanket, eyes half closed as if trying to erase the past. A young doctor, maybe 35, entered with a clipboard and a calm nod. "I'm Dr. Patel. You're the grandmother?" he asked. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. He examined Noah, checked his blood pressure, pressed gently on his stomach, and rolled up his sleeve. There were bruises, old and new, fading purple and yellow. A nurse recorded every detail, every number. "He weighs 37 pounds, Dr. Patel said quietly. "At his age, he should be around 50 to 55. I froze. You didn't have to be a doctor to know how terrifying that gap was. "He's moderately to severely malnourished, slightly dehydrated, and has multiple bruises on his back and arms," the doctor continued, keeping a professional tone. But I saw the sadness in his eyes. Noah stirred, whispering weakly, "I don't remember the last time I had real food. Sometimes Jeff brought a sandwich. Sometimes he forgot. Mom sleeps a lot." Dr. Patel turned to me. "He'll be admitted overnight for fluids and observation. We'll be reporting this to Child Protective Services, but..." His gaze softened. "He'll need a stable relative to stay with after discharge. If you're willing, we can start the temporary guardianship process tonight." I looked at Noah, so thin, pale, clutching Ethan's old baseball cap to his chest. "I don't want temporary," I said. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep my grandson safe. For good." Noah turned his head toward me. His eyes, fragile, searching, made my heart twist. Not from fear, but because I saw at last a flicker of hope returning. A soft knock at the door. A woman with cropped hair and a gray blazer stepped in, holding a thick folder. "I'm Monica from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you, ma'am." We stepped into the hallway. Her tone was brief but sharp. "Do you know how long this has been going on?" "I'd guess months, maybe longer. But tonight was the first clear sign." "You tried contacting them before?" "Yes, my daughter avoided me, and Jeff always interfered." Monica nodded, flipping pages. "We'll coordinate with the police and hospital. Within hours, I'll request an emergency custody order. Until then, the child will stay with you." I could only nod. I didn't know the legal process, but I knew one thing. Noah needed a home. A warm, clean home. With real meals, a nightlight by the bed, and a grandmother who'd stay up all night if he ever woke up afraid again. When I returned to the room, Noah was asleep. His face had softened, breathing calm and steady. I sat beside him, took his tiny hand in mine and whispered, "From now on, everything's going to be different. I promise." 3 days later, Noah was discharged. He sat quietly in the back seat of my car, hugging his old baseball cap to his chest as if it were part of him. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off his tousled amber blonde hair. In the rearview mirror, I saw those small eyes, still wary, still learning to trust the world again. "Grandma, are we really going home?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "We're going home." My house on Maple Creek Drive is small but bright and quiet. I cleaned out the guest room that very first night, set up a twin bed with blue sheets, and laid out the dinosaur blanket Noah used to love. 5 years ago. When he stepped inside, Noah stood in the doorway for a long time, as if afraid that taking another step would make it all disappear. I sat on the edge of the bed and patted the mattress. Want to try it? See if it's comfy? Am I not getting locked in, Grandma? No, Noah, no one locks doors on you here. I saw the corner of his mouth quiver, uncertain if it was fear or emotion. Then he walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. When his little hand touched the blanket, I heard the softest exhale I've ever known. The following days were quiet, but cautiously so. Noah ate slowly, as if he were afraid the food might be taken away from him. I didn't push. I always made sure there was a cookie on the kitchen counter and a warm glass of milk waiting for me each night. At first, he woke up screaming every night, his hair damp with sweat, shouting, "Don't lock me in again!" I'd rush to his side, wrap him in blankets, and whisper, "You're safe now. You're home. Grandma's here." And every night I sat beside his bed until sunrise, my hand holding his the whole time. One afternoon, Noah sat on the living room floor playing with his old baseball cap. He looked up and asked, "Grandma, was my dad really good at baseball?" I smiled. "Your dad wasn't the best, to be honest. But you know what? Ethan never gave up. He practiced every day until he finally hit that ball." What else do you remember about him?" I stood, walked over to the old wooden cabinet, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a small oak chest, Ethan's chest. It held a few photos, a faded notebook, a silver pen, and some old baseball cards. I placed the chest in front of Noah and opened the lid. "These are the things left after your dad's accident. I saved them, waiting for the day you'd be old enough to understand." Noah stared at the items for a long time, like he was seeing his father for the first time, through the fragments of memory left behind. He picked up a photo of Ethan in high school, wearing a baseball uniform, cap tilted sideways, and softly asked, Do I look like him, Grandma?" "Very much, especially the eyes, and the way you hold that cap, just like he did." "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" My throat tightened. "Not just proud, sweetheart. He'd thank you for still holding on, even when everything got so hard." Noah didn't say anything more. He just lowered his head, hugged the cap to his chest, and for the first time since that terrifying night, I saw the corners of his mouth curl into a faint smile. I stood outside his door, looking through the window where the afternoon sun lit up his golden hair. For the first time in years, the house was filled with a quiet kind of laughter, not a full one, but warm enough to believe something good was coming. I used to think being a grandmother meant cooking meals, telling stories, and holding little ones on cold nights. I never thought one day I'd have to walk into a courtroom and fight to keep the right to care for my own flesh and blood. 3 days after Noah was discharged, I sat in the office of Kathy Lee, a seasoned attorney with short hair, a firm voice, and the eyes of someone not easily intimidated. Kathy listened as I told her everything, from the midnight phone call to what I saw at the house, the hospital visit, the bruises, the old cap, Tina's silence, and Jeff's threats. She didn't take many notes. She just listened, and at the end, she said calmly, "We'll file for emergency guardianship first, then permanent. But you need to be ready. They won't go down without a fight. If Tina tries to regain custody, we'll need proof." In the following weeks, Kathy and I worked nonstop. Medical reports from Dr. Patel stating clear evidence of malnutrition, dehydration, and bruises. Scene photos taken by the police, showing the bedroom lock, overflowing trash, and Tina unconscious. Witness statements from neighbors. Jenny, the woman next door, said she saw Noah climbing out of the kitchen window several times. One day, she gave him a sandwich because he looked like he might faint from hunger. Financial documents. Investigation revealed Noah was receiving 100 month in Social Security benefits under Ethan's name. Tina was the payee. But Kathy obtained bank records under court order, showing that money was used for bar transactions, online sports, betting Jeff's truck payments, no grocery store purchases in the last 2 months. Then came the most challenging part, proving I could care for Noah. Despite being 72 years old, Kathy asked me to get a complete medical checkup at the local clinic. The results? Blood pressure, normal. Cholesterol, stable. No signs of memory impairment. Mentally and physically fit to care for a child. The doctor wrote a formal statement. Patient Clara Jensen is in good physical and mental health, suitable for full-time care of a minor. Child Protective Services also sent someone to inspect my home. A young woman named Megan, wearing a gray suit, went through every room, checked that the medicine cabinet was locked, evaluated Noah's room, clean bed, toys, a study desk, observed how I interacted with him. Noah stood pressed against the doorway as Megan entered, but when she asked, "How do you feel staying here with your grandmother?" he answered without hesitation, "Safe. There are no locks on the outside of doors here." I turned away to hide my tears. Megan wrote that down and smiled. 3 weeks later, Kathy called me. "Tina has hired a lawyer." "Really?" "Not a big firm, but someone experienced in custody disputes. I've heard they're going to focus on your age and the fact that you broke a window and entered her home without permission." I was silent for a moment. Then I said, "I broke that window to save my grandson, and if I have to, I'll break the whole world." Kathy chuckled. "I need you to keep that same fire when we're in court. You're not just fighting for Noah, you're fighting for every child who's ever been silenced by the adults around them." We filed for permanent guardianship. The hearing was set for the following month. I looked at Noah, sitting at his little desk, coloring a dinosaur with crayons. His back was straighter, his voice more precise, and from time to time he'd burst into laughter while watching cartoons. I whispered to myself, "I saved him once. Now I'll fight to keep him." The courtroom that morning was colder than I'd expected. Hard wooden benches, harsh fluorescent lighting, and the judge's gavel sounded like it split the air in two. I sat beside Kathy, clutching a wrinkled handkerchief. Across the room, my daughter, Tina, entered in a pale beige suit with light makeup and eyes downcast. Beside her stood her attorney, a tall man with a slick, calculated tone. His name was Donald Frey, and he was the first to speak. "Your Honor," Frey began calmly, "Mrs. Clara Jensen, while undoubtedly loving, is 72 years old. The truth is, she will not be able to accompany a child into adulthood. More importantly, she illegally broke into her daughter's home, smashing a window and entering without permission, regardless of motive." He paused, then turned directly to me. "Ma'am, how do you respond to the fact that you could die in a few years? Who will care for the boy then?" The courtroom fell silent. My heart skipped a beat. Then I stood and looked him in the eye. "I could die tomorrow, or I could live to 90, like my mother. Yes, I broke that window, but I broke it to save my grandson's life, not to steal anything but his right to survive. And if I have to die to protect him, I'll die with no regrets." Kathy stepped up with a folder in hand. Medical reports showing malnutrition, dehydration, and bruises consistent with abuse. Neighbor testimonies, sightings of Noah locked in his room for hours, once crawling out of a window. Bank records, Noah's. 100-month Social Security benefits spent on liquor, bars, and betting by Tina and Jeff. Crime scene photos, the exterior lock on Noah's bedroom door, floors covered in trash, empty liquor bottles everywhere. Kathy looked directly at the judge. This 72-year-old grandmother did what many younger adults would not have had the courage to do. She intervened at significant legal risk to rescue a child from his own mother. Then I was called to the witness stand. I'm not too old to know when my grandson is starving. I'm not too deaf to hear his cries, and I'm not too blind to see that if I hadn't shown up that night, Noah might not have survived. I raised my left hand, still bearing the scar from the broken glass. This doesn't hurt, but the image of that boy curled in a corner, clutching his father's cap, that will haunt me forever. Frey asked the court to give Tina a chance to rebuild the relationship, saying she'd been attending therapy, had apologized, and, as his biological mother, deserved a chance to make amends. Tina choked back tears. I just want to see my son grow up. That baby, he used to call me Mom. I looked at my daughter, my heart aching. I didn't hate Tina, but I couldn't forget the months Noah lived like a prisoner inside her home. After a 1-hour recess, the judge returned and read the verdict with firm clarity. After reviewing all testimony, evidence, and circumstances, the court grants permanent legal guardianship to Mrs. Clara Jensen. She is hereby the sole legal guardian of Noah Jensen. Tina Jensen is granted supervised visitation once per month. Jeffrey Collins is barred from all contact with the child in any form. Bang! The gavel fell. The weight on my chest lifted as if hundreds of pounds vanished. I turned to Kathy. She nodded. You did it? Noah had been waiting outside with the social worker. When I stepped out, he ran to me and hugged me tight, without asking the outcome. He just held on like that was all the answer he needed. I leaned down and whispered, From now on, we're a family. Forever. Since that day, Tina has never returned to my doorstep. Here is your full English-American translation with precise grammar, natural flow, and no added or omitted content. She vanished from town like smoke after rain. No one knew where she went. But a few weeks later, I received a letter, mailed in a familiar handwriting, on a wrinkled envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky and full of crossed-out lines. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I still have some part of me left that's good enough to write. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know, the day I saw Noah holding you tight in court, I understood. I didn't lose the most precious thing in my life because you took him. I lost him because I let go. You once told me, love doesn't disappear. It just goes quiet when it's been hurt too much. Now I understand. And I know Noah's been hurt far too much by his own mother. I'm at New Horizons Recovery Center. This is my second time in rehab. The first time, I only did it because I was forced to. This time, I'm doing it because I know I'll die if I don't change. Every morning here, I have to face myself. No alcohol, no Jeff, no excuses. Just a mirror. And a face I was once too ashamed to look at. I'm writing this on day 31 of sobriety. Every line feels like a hard breath, but it's also a promise to myself. If I ever deserve forgiveness, it won't be a miracle from anyone else. It'll be a miracle I have to create. I'm not ready to ask to see Noah yet, but if you read him this letter, please tell him, I love you. And I will try to become someone you deserve. Your daughter, Tina. I folded the letter slowly, my hands trembling like they did the day I first carried Noah home from the hospital. I didn't know what I felt. Anger, sorrow, relief, or heaviness. Maybe all of it, tangled together like a net I couldn't pull apart. I didn't show the letter to Noah right away. He was at the corner of the room sketching a drawing of his dad next to a dinosaur wearing a baseball cap. I simply whispered, your mom is trying, and I think she's doing the right thing. Noah didn't ask anything else. He just nodded, but I noticed his eyes weren't as cold as they once were. In those eyes, there was a faint flicker of hope and a quiet waiting. Winter arrived earlier than usual. Snow blanketed the rooftops. The bare trees in front of my porch held a kind of peaceful, cold beauty, quiet yet pure. Noah is in 3rd grade now. He writes clearly, does his homework independently, eats regularly, and sleeps better. He still has nightmares sometimes, but now he can talk about them. He no longer bottles them up inside as he did before. I keep Tina's letter in the drawer of my desk, where I store the most important things: Ethan's photo, the guardianship papers, and now, this letter. One late January day, I got a call. Mrs. Clara, this is Monica, the social worker. Tina just completed her 90-day treatment. She's in transitional housing now. She'd like to know if you and Noah would agree to a supervised visit at the Family Support Center. I didn't answer right away. That evening, I asked Noah while he was playing with Legos on the floor, "Noah, would you want to see your mom?" He paused, hands still, not looking at me. "I don't know. What if she falls asleep again?" I didn't respond with words. I just sat beside him and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. 2 weeks later, Noah and I visited the Family Support Center, a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard and a kids' playroom. Tina was waiting inside. She wore a gray knit coat, her hair tied back. She looked thinner, but her eyes were clearer, alert. When she saw Noah, she stood, not rushing forward, not reaching to hug, just standing still. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you for coming." Noah didn't respond. He stood behind me, leaning gently against my back. They sat in the same room. Tina didn't try to say too much. She simply listened while Noah talked about math homework, his favorite dinosaur, and how Grandma once burned the toast on one side. The stories were hesitant, scattered, but they were the first puzzle pieces of rebuilding trust. At the end of the visit, Tina didn't ask to hug him. She just said, "You might not believe in me right now, and that's okay. I deserve that. But if you give me a chance, I promise, I won't disappear again." Noah nodded slightly, and for the first time, he looked his mother in the eye. In March, Noah turned 11. I asked him, "How would you like to celebrate your birthday?" Without hesitation, he replied, "You bake a cake like last year, and I want Mom to come." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Are you sure?" "I don't know if she's really changed, but I want to find out." On the day of his birthday, Tina arrived right on time. She brought a small gift box, a handmade wooden photo frame. Inside was a drawing she had recreated from memory. A father, a mother, and Noah are sitting under a baseball field tree. The three of us sat, ate cake, talked, and looked at old pictures of Ethan. No one cried. No one talked much about the past. But the silence no longer felt heavy. It was a quiet understanding. We were starting a new chapter. That night before bed, Noah asked me, "Grandma, do you think Mom really changed? Please let me know if you'd like the next part translated as well. Here's the full English American translation of your final section, professionally translated with grammatical precision and emotional fidelity." I didn't answer right away. I sat down on the edge of the bed and gently brushed the boy's hair. "I'm not sure," I said, "and you don't have to believe it right away. You just have to watch." Noah nodded. He curled up under the blanket, hugged his old baseball cap, and fell sound asleep. That summer came early. Warm breezes from the west carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the soft buzz of cicadas down the street. Noah had just finished the school year with a report card that brought tears to my eyes. Improved math scores, top marks in English, and a teacher's note that read, "A child who truly listens to others." He still slept with his father's old cap beside his pillow, but his sleep was deeper now. No more midnight screams, no more fearful eyes every time a door shut too loudly. One afternoon, while Noah was coloring at the kitchen table, Tina knocked on the door. No warning, no urgency. I opened the door. She was holding a small wooden box, smaller than Ethan's old chest. She didn't say anything, just placed it gently on the table. Inside was a series of photos documenting her recovery journey. Photos from the rehab center, her certificate of completion, pictures of meals she'd cooked herself, parenting books, and sketches she'd drawn of her memories with Noah as a toddler. She said, "I'm not asking to be his full-time mom again. I just want to be a part of what I once lost." I looked at her, and I saw eyes that no longer avoided mine. I didn't see the lost daughter from years ago. I saw a woman trying to learn how to be a mother from the beginning. One Friday evening, Noah said, Tonight, I want Grandma's meatballs with tomato sauce. Can Mom eat with us? I nearly dropped my spoon. That night, the three of us sat around my small kitchen table. For the first time in years. No yelling, no clinking bottles, no shadows, only the smell of warm meatballs, crunchy bread, the clink of spoons on plates, and Noah's soft laughter. Tina talked about her new part-time job at a local craft store. Noah shared stories from school. I poured lemonade, adding fresh slices just like I used to when Ethan was still alive. On the living room wall now hangs a new photo. Noah, in his brand new baseball uniform, standing on the field wearing his father's cap, eyes looking toward the horizon. Beside it, a framed photo of young Ethan and a hand-drawn picture by Tina with a caption that reads, "Family is where we find our way back to each other, after everything." I was 72 when I became a mother again, not to my daughter, but to my grandson. I used to think time only takes things away. My husband, my son, almost my grandson, but it turns out time also heals, time changes, and time gives us the grace to begin again. There's no such thing as a perfect family, but there are families who learn to forgive and love with everything they have left. Thank you for staying with us through the end of this story. If you believe in love, in recovery, in the irreplaceable value of family, leave us a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel to help us bring more stories like this to life. Because here we believe there is always a way back home.